explanation or description of your own experience. Appreciate it. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. One person said, I absolutely love how practicing mindfulness is so relaxing. What is the reason that my body relaxes when I focus on my body with my mind, when I focus on the moment? I've experienced this many times while doing this practice, but I have never understood how it occurs. Would love to know more about this. So I would like Phil and Allan each to have a turn at this. Maybe we'll start with Phil.
That's fine, Leslie. I'm sorry, but I was just.
You were distracted.
I was trying to go to the questions and make sure. Is this?
Do you want me to ask Allan first, and you can take your time?
Yeah, please. I'm just
Go
trying
ahead,
to.
Allan.
I was just.
Sure.
Yeah. What question is this, Leslie? Could you tell me?
It's the one from in the chat room from Wanda. So what's the mechanism by which, when we focus on the body, we relax?
Thank you. Okay.
So very briefly, and many of you know this, the body has ways of balancing itself always. When I'm hot, I sweat. When I'm cold, I shiver. When I need to run, my heart rate builds up. There's an autonomic or automatic part of the nervous system. And there are two parts. The one's called sympathetic, which is adrenaline. It's sympathetic to the needs. That's arousal, stress, anxiety, tension, the fight or flight or freeze. That's the driving up, the fuel, that moment, the hot stuff, as Phil said earlier. If we feed that with our emotions and our stories and our judgments and our sense of righteousness and ego and anger, we stay aroused. So when we stay in our minds, that's what feeds all that. And all we need to do is stop feeding that gasoline, and then the parasympathetic nervous system, sometimes called the vagus system or the rest and digest, I'm simplifying things, that just is the baseline that it comes to. So what happens when we're doing the body, we're taking our attention away from the usual content of the mind, we're shifting it to the content of our lived experience in the body and the breath, and that stops the flames and it lets the parasympathetic nervous system kick in. Sometimes so much so that you might find yourself nodding off. So that's why some people nod off during this, because you get so relaxed, because these are the very conditions that we want when we go to sleep at bedtime. So that's basically it, that we're getting out of. So, and this is where we don't need to push or strive not to think or force myself into relaxing, because that then becomes a whole lot of mental activity, which just makes everything worse. And then we're judging, am I relaxing? Is this the right way to be relaxing? No, just shift from all the content. The parasympathetic kicks in. Cool.
So just following up on Allan's explanation, when we are unfocused, when we are not task-oriented, our brain goes to what is called the default mode network. So the default mode network is all about me. It's all about self-referencing. It's all about planning, thinking. It's not about the present moment. And this may have a survival quality to it, because it actually allows us to sort of think about our problems. So when we're not task-oriented, we ruminate, and ruminate leads to suffering. Because when we think about the past, we get depressed, and we think about what we need to do in the future, we get anxiety. And all of us are wonderful at rehearsing catastrophes. So when we focus on the body, we get out of the default mode network, which gets out of the possibility of depression or anxiety and takes us into the present moment. We know that the mind and the body are intimately connected, and that a still mind will lead to a still body. When you get worried and anxious and depressed, what's your body posture? So what happens is that we come into what we call a collapsed body posture. And what happens to your face? You get a frown, right? Your jaw clenches. So it's been shown, but by assuming certain body postures, you can actually change your emotional state. So by assuming an upright posture with an open chest and putting a smile on your face, you can actually make yourself emotionally happy. So try that next time. And the one last interesting part is there was this Italian neuroscientist called Antonio Damasio. And Antonio felt that when we experience something, it's processed in the body first, probably part of that fight or flight response to get ready for things. And when your body gets into an anxious sense, your mind then interprets what your body is saying. So that's what I'd like to offer for that question. Thank you.
Okay.
And Leslie, your comment?
I'm going to go on because now we're getting more questions. So I'll move on to another question. And this question is, which would be a good meditation practice to do daily? Do I change it depending on what I most need on a given day? So I'll take that question because some of the other questions are directed to specific people. So the basic mindfulness practice is an excellent practice to have as your standard practice. And of course, there's many different ways to do mindfulness practice, but a basic mindfulness practice. And then I think some form of a cultivation practice, such as loving kindness practice or compassion practice, is also important to have at least some of the time or for part of your meditation. So it could be at the beginning that you do a little open your heart practice, because it helps your attention to settle. If you feel safe and warm and relaxed, then meditation goes more easily. You are more able to be mindful. And then at the end of a mindfulness practice, it can be helpful for moving out into the world to open the heart and think of, even consciously, how am I going to be in my day? What is my intention for this day with others and with myself? So I'm going to leave that as the answer because I want to get to, there's several now questions arising. So come down here, and this is for Phil. How can I live with a plentiful life and joy if I am completely not attached?
Okay, oh, there's the question, right? So how can I live with plentifulness? Is that what it is?
Yeah, she corrected herself further down. And joy if I'm completely not attached.
Right. So first of all, we have to understand that following a mindfulness practice does not mean that you don't have preferences, that you don't enjoy worldly things. You know, we live our life, you can, in terms of a relative or an absolute perspective. Is everything all a construct, and therefore I'm not going to get involved with it because I know that it's not real? So that we have to be very careful, because this can lead to something called spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing says, you know what, this isn't real, so I'm not going to get involved with it. But this is simply a way as well where you can actually suppress your own inner woundings, It's a way of bypassing them. They're not real, they're not important. I am above that. So first of all, one has to be very careful about that. The problem is not that we as a self are attached to things. As I said before, the real issue is our attachment to the self. So one has the capacity to enjoy all the things that we have in life, but it's not this issue of clinging and saying who I am is dependent on having these things. If I don't have this relationship, this car, this job, then I will suffer. We live a life of what if rather than what is. Our sense of self-worth is dependent on action. And unfortunately, we don't recognize that self-worth is innate, that it is who we are because we are human, and that we are all gifted.
Okay, thank you, Phil. So there's another question, and Allan is a good person for this one, I think. Is being a wounded child a condition of being human? Not everyone was hurt during their childhood, and they still suffer.
Thanks, Leslie. Yeah. I've spent a career looking at this issue as a child and adolescent psychiatrist. Some of you may not know that, but this is a critical piece, and there's so much here, but I will be brief as I can. The wording, Monica, is very interesting because you said not everyone was hurt during their childhood. You're correct. Not everyone has suffered significant, memorable neglect. Not everyone has suffered significant enough abuse of whatever kind or ilk, or in the worst cases, we call it trauma. At the same time, though, I think if we look at hurt in a bigger sense than what happened to me, we have all hurt at different times when there's an emotion we experience that is unpleasant. It hurts. It hurts when I fell and scraped my knee. It hurt when I asked for an ice cream and my parents said, no, it'll spoil the appetite for your dinner. There's a little, So hurt runs the gamut of any time there's something I don't like. All of us have hurt when we've lost things or had to let go of things, either voluntarily or involuntarily. So I think the word hurt is a much more universal concept, that there are things which have hurt us. And as Phil spoke about earlier on, all those little hurts, if we believe that those hurts happened because of me, which is what many children do. If I was treated poorly, if I got said no to, it's because I am not worthy or lovable enough, or I didn't earn the ice cream, or there's something wrong with me. So we internalize this, ossify this whole story over thousands of little experiences. And that's how we come to believe we're not worthy, love, or safe. And so hurt can be very, very subtle, and we can watch them. And then later on, when similar triggers or events happen, when somebody says no to us, we can fly into a rage. And it's like, wow, where did that reaction come from? And we all have this. So just that broad idea, hurt is not necessarily abuse or neglect, or in the worst cases, trauma. Just a very broad one. But the experience of hurt, loss, pain, disappointment, grief, that is universal. And so how do we meet all of that stuff, even if we haven't been significantly abused, etc.? I'll stop there. I hope that's a bit of a help, Monica. I see you nodding.
Okay, thank you, Allan. So the next question I'll take a stab at. There are times when I have a panic while being in public, and I have difficulty stopping the panic while observing my breath and body sensations. What would you recommend I try? Is it possible with practice to eventually stop the panic without having to remove myself from the situation or people? So what I would recommend in this situation is to go a little bit more external or peripheral. So if you're going to stay in your body, you might want to feel your hands and your feet rather than the central part of your body, because that's where most of the physiology is taking place of panic, the fast heart rate, the dry mouth, the lump in the throat, the emotions of feeling dread. And so if you pay attention to your hands and feet, particularly the feet, and feeling the ground can be helpful. And then the other thing is to look around you, to take in visually that you're actually safe. So there's no gunman or someone who's actually going to there's no fire, etc. There's actually no real physical danger. And so you can confirm for yourself that you are actually safe, which feeds back into your nervous system. You could look for beauty in your environment. So perhaps there's a tree or the sky or a beautiful object, or even like a reassuring person, someone who seems warm and safe, and let that feed into the nervous system, into yourself, to reassure you that you're actually okay. I've been told that it helps to look for a door and a window, and so that you know that you can escape if you really need to. I've tried that one. It doesn't really help me, but apparently it does some people. And then the one that really works the best for me is to turn towards the fear and say to myself, I can tolerate this moment of fear. So you break it down into the smallest components. I can tolerate this moment of fear. I can tolerate this moment of fear. And just keep saying it over and over again to yourself, to myself. And then it downregulates the fear because you're not feeding fear with fear. And then the other one that works the best from my experience as well is to look at an object or feel the object underneath me and say, it's not afraid. So when I'm on meditation retreats, I'll often get quite a lot of fear arising, and I go to my room and I lie on my bed and I feel my bed coming into my body and go, well, the bed's not afraid. And just that sensation of the bed supporting me and sort of dissolving into the safety, that the truth that the bed's not afraid, seems to help quite a lot. But this is an excellent question, and we have other people here. So if either Phil or Allan would like to add to that. I mean, this is Allan's, he probably treated many people with anxiety and panic during his career. So go ahead, Allan.
Yeah. We had a whole talk I gave about 18 months ago on the what mindfulness can and cannot do. And Phil used the term bypass a little bit earlier. So there are times when we need different pieces and different lenses. Mindfulness practice, meditation practice, coming to the heart, healing the wounded child, etc. There's so much we can do for ourselves. At some point, though, if what you're doing is not working, you seek help. If you've got a simple tax return, you do it yourself. If you've got a business, you probably need an accountant. So be careful that, and I'm not saying anyone here needs it, but we always need to be aware that you cannot meditate your way out of what might be a need for some therapy, somebody who's professionally trained to help you through this. So at some point, again, you listen to the wisdom of your body. If it's one panic attack a year, it comes out of the blue, it's a non-issue, otherwise you're fine. If you're having 3 panic attacks a day and you're afraid to go in your car or you can't get outside anymore, perhaps you're needing a little more help other than these wonderful strategies, which are practical in the heat of the moment. But again, sometimes you need the support. It's wise and gentle and compassionate to get support. I don't do my own taxes. I don't repair my own car. I don't tinker with my furnace. There are just some things I need help for. When my kids needed support, emotionally, etc., I got them help that they needed along their way growing up. And so we do this. We go for help and support when needed. I think that's very wise. Without judgment or criticism, it's not weakness or whatever. We do what we can, and then we get the community of support. And if that community of support didn't exist, I would never have had the career that I had, and nor would Leona.
Thank you, Alan. And Phil, do you have anything you want to add to those comments? Okay, so we have room for some more questions, including if you want to do a live question. You can turn your mic or you can unmute yourself and ask a live question.
There's a question that came through here. Maybe you can answer it. That came through privately, so maybe that's why it didn't show up on your screen.
Okay.
Are emotional and physical pain or illness looked at the same or differently in a mindfulness practice? So do you approach emotional and physical pain the same or different?
In certain aspects, they're the same. They're a painful experience. The physical pain does not have an inherent emotional quality to it, but we often add an emotion to it, which may be pushing it away. Fear, this is unpleasant, I don't want it. Anger even towards continuing pain. Sadness might be emotions that we add to a physical pain. But an emotional pain has a physical component. So at least in my experience, if I have an emotional pain, such as say sadness, I will feel it usually in my chest. So I'll feel like a tightness in my chest. It will cause my body to go into a certain posture. And as a family physician, I'm often seeing people who bring in symptoms like a physical pain, which I work, of course, to do what my job is, which is to try to find a medical cause for it. But often I don't find a medical cause. So a person can believe that their physical pains are, and quite rightly, they come to a doctor to find out if their physical pain is caused by a medical condition, but we come down to sometimes that we can't find a medical cause. And so what do we do then? Well, then we tend to work toward, okay, well, what's going on in your life? And often people are already starting to say, well, you know, I'm pretty stressed right now. And this came up most powerfully after I had that difficult conversation, whatever, people identify it themselves. But they are interconnected, and the way we work with them is very similar in meditation, using the breath, distributing our attention as we can tolerate toward the experience, moving it away when it's overwhelming, bringing in different practices to support the mind and the body being able to hold the experience without becoming overwhelmed. And those of you who work in the psychology field or who've gone to therapy, they speak about a window of tolerance. So if an experience of pain is too much, we're re-wounding ourselves by staying with it. And so we need to have skills to keep it within a level that it doesn't cause us more difficulty than what we already have.
Leslie, can I add something to that
Yes.
answer, which was great? Thoughts, emotions, and physicality are all interconnected. Things do not exist in isolation. And, you know, the Buddha made a very famous comment and very informative. Pain is expected, suffering is optional. So what does that mean? Well, you know what? This is what happens. Do we ever live with just what is? Absolutely not. We create stories. So everything gets referenced against our belief system. If we could come to life and not have a sense of self that everything is referenced against, we wouldn't have suffering. If we could reference everything against a universal ethical standard and not self, we wouldn't have suffering. So in the sense that we create stories about all our experience that references to the sense of self, that is a statement on our self-worth. And that's our problem. We're great storytellers. And the worst problem is we believe our stories. And mindfulness is not about fixing our stories. Mindfulness is all about holding our stories. Leslie, do we have any more questions at all?
I don't detect any other questions in the chat box.
So let me ask you and Allan, and because one last go, we're coming to the end, but it'd be very interesting. And you know, we've had discussions in our groups about mindfulness. And so if you were to define mindfulness, and again, as we know, one definition is not universal, but curious. What is your definition of mindfulness?
I see mindfulness as paying attention to what's arising without commentary, but with wisdom. So seeing clearly what's arising, and because I've meditated in the past and I've lived in the past, I've had past experience, I have the wisdom to know what's a skillful way to be with this experience. And learning over time that, say my mind is full of anger and I'm meditating. What's skillful for me to do in that situation? There's a whole bunch of options. So the mindfulness contains the wisdom about what is going to be helpful, and the overall wisdom that leads to happiness is to not cling to any particular experience, to be non-attached, as Phil said. So how do I experience, say, anger that's arising during a meditation? I don't actually have to do anything or respond to anything, and increase my chances of releasing the anger without it becoming more embedded in my nervous system. So I might practice loving kindness, or I might just do bare awareness. It's at a level where I can just stay present with it. The mindfulness also acts as a protector, so that when something is arising, I can choose to ignore it if it's small, so I can turn away from it. So that's one way that mindfulness operates. It also operates to allow me to know how to choose behavior. So that's another thing that's already been brought up. When I have to act, what's wise? It's when it comes from non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion. Kindness, compassion, turning away from grasping. So mindfulness includes all of those aspects, is what I would say.
What she said, exactly what Leslie said. And it's interesting as I think about, Phil, your wording of the question, what's my definition of mindfulness? And the best answer that I have, which is the same as what Leslie has as I look at the framing, is there was a description. When we try and define things, this is the ego attempting to nail down an experience. And the moment I open my mouth, my words fail, because an experience is something that is lived, it is felt, it is also sensed. So we all know what a beautiful sunset is, but the moment I try and describe it or define it, I'm just the finger pointing at the moon, as the metaphor goes. So I think it's for all of us, and everything that Leslie said is absolutely true, that we can wrestle with it. And the way that I've tried to simplify it in my mind is coming back to something I said earlier, which is this both and. It is both process and content, and they overlap and they talk to each other. Are mindful of, as Leslie said, the moment. And then in that moment, a mindful, skillful practice arises and meets it. And so there's this constant being and doing. And I think mindfulness contains both of those. We can't really separate them out. Right? Just as when they talk about, in the Buddhist traditions, the Eightfold Path, you can't tease them out. You can't tease out wise concentration from white mindfulness. They just together. And so I think in the definition, the broadest, is that in any one moment, you might be in the doing, you might be in the being, and they go together. And the moment we try and pull them apart, you can't really, there's a tension. And the left brain says, I'm confused, I can't handle this. But experience says, left brain, just shut up and listen to your experience. I'll call on you when you need it, buddy. Take a chill pill. So I want to show you a little picture. It won't take for 10 seconds. So some months ago, a friend of mine drew a picture of me, and I was saying how I've got to get out of my own way. So they drew a picture, psychiatric help, 5 cents. There's little university Allan. In other words, my left ego-driven brain that needs to be in recess until called upon. And this for me is just so helpful that I can tell that part of me that wants to nail everything down and define it with words and just, Allan, just chill out. Just have some fun there, buddy. We'll call on you when you need it. And it's been so wonderful for little Allan, University Allan, thinking Allan, to relax and go and read his little books and study. And in the meantime, the other part of Allan can just have fun and enjoy an experience.
He got your hair.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. Yeah.
So are there any more questions, Leslie, or have we come to the end of that?
I think that's all the questions that are up.
All right. So Allan, would you like to make our closing comments, please?
We've said it before and we'll say it again, and we feel it. Just what a joy and a pleasure to have spent the last 7 and a bit hours together, to practice community, to listen to and with each other. We're always learning, we're always teaching. And where I started off this morning, just to whatever speaks to you today, to take that away with you. You don't need to remember all of it. Trust what has come up for you. Those moments of curiosity, those moments of tension, something that was hot that got you. You made a note of it as the day went on. That is your path. Those are the ingredients that you need in your recipe now. And to follow that. Trust yourself a whole lot more than you may typically do. because when we drop in, we all have this innate wisdom, joy, capacity, love. We all have a heart. We're all wanting to figure this out, this thing called life. So just trust it. And it is that woundedness that sometimes gets in the way of us trusting ourselves. So once we recognize that we are already safe in this moment, we're all safe. We're already worthy enough. We're already loved and lovable enough. We can actually relax into trusting our own experience. We will be sending out a survey afterwards, asking for feedback, reflections, recommendations, suggestions, etc. You're all here because you are aware of the Wellness Through Mindfulness. If this has been a joyful learning day for you, if it's been a tough day for you, please remind yourselves to just stay in touch. Think of people who might be interested in joining the community, Wellness Through Mindfulness, the library, the website, the link on Phil's homepage, the Breath Project, Calgary Public Library. And just on behalf of Phil and Leslie and I, it's just been a tremendous joy to do this. No matter how many times we sit, no matter how many times we have formal or informal or intensive practice, every moment is fresh and open and new and enriching. And as Phil has said on many occasions, it's just the gift that keeps on giving. That's why we do this work. It's why we love it. And it's why mindfulness loves us. And on that note, I
And Allan, just about
you again.
our
Yes, Phil.
just that we did record the sessions today, and they will be posted on the WTM website, and they'll go under either the meditation section or the Zoom talk section. And hopefully that'll be up within a week or two. And I don't know, are we going to post any summary of the talks too? Or I think that I will post my mindfulness talk on our website. So if you're looking for those acronyms, you'll be able to find them there. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'm blessed.
Thank you.